why we need coordination that I'm partly doing is that this area is spread throughout actually all of the 6 schools of Aalto University. That's Aalto in brief, and now we are going to start the presentations. It's my pleasure to introduce the Aalto-based speaker here, Professor Risto Ilmoniemi. Risto has done a long research career and a career as a research leader at Helsinki University of Technology, which is one of the key predecessors of Aalto University, and also at HUS, also at Aalto University, where he has been researcher, research leader, professor, institute head, and also department head of Aalto's Department of Neuroscience and Biomedical Engineering. Also, Risto was an academy professor nationally here in Finland, and also nowadays is an Aalto distinguished professor. Risto is one of the leading medical devices experts, and in particular, I think, in the areas of MEG, which is the brain imaging technology known in more length as magnetic encephalography, and also TMS, which is the therapy technology called in more length transcranial magnetic stimulation. So we have a great speaker here in Risto. Thanks again for coming, and please, the floor is now yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and it's a pleasure and honor to be here. Well, the title, Motivations and Combining Commercialization with Research Career, is a reflection of the questions that were posed. No, it doesn't move.
It doesn't work?
No. Should, but doesn't.
Maybe. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these were the questions that were posed to all of us, all the speakers: motivations to get involved in innovation, why you decided to take the path of entrepreneur or founder, and how you managed to combine commercialization and research career. I start with a quote of a famous person, and I will also end this talk with another quote. So this begins like this: everybody works in the shadow of what they have previously done. You have to overcome that. Bob Dylan, in his Nobel Prize talk given after the event, he wrote this, and what it means is that if you are really successful in something, especially at a young age, it's very hard to overcome that and go to something new. And this is what happens to many researchers. You have some progress and you're happy with that, and you will stay with that. And sometimes it happens that you are forced out, maybe fired, or you don't have money or whatever, and that may be a good thing to be forced to do something new. I think this is what it means. Bob Dylan, of course, was very successful at a very young age, so maybe he thought that way. I don't know, but that's the quote, and that's how I interpret it. Well, a little bit about my personal history. Well, Markus already explained. I'm not going to read all of these. So I started at the low temperature lab at the Helsinki University of Technology as a summer student, and worked on brain imaging, this new technology, magnetoencephalography, with which you measure brain waves magnetically without even touching the head. I was a postdoc at New York University. Then on this hospital campus, I was the head of the biomag laboratory for 9 years. That was really nice exposure to the hospital. We brought the instruments that had been developed by us and my friends, especially at the MEG instruments. And then I established a Nexstim company in the year 2000, and after a while came back to the university and so on. So the first question was motivation. I think I am a dreamer, so dream about better things. So as a young boy, a schoolboy, I wanted to understand the world. I would nowadays say that I wanted to understand the universe, the physics of it in particular, and a bit later understand ourselves, human beings, and the brain and the mind, in particular because I was starting to work on this topic, imaging the brain and the mind. And I wanted to do something meaningful in science, but also something useful. There's a great pressure nowadays for science to do useful things. Sometimes it's bad because it distracts, but I couldn't help. I always thought that it should be useful. Sometimes it would be better just to do what is interesting in science, but that's what I thought. So in developing technology and the ideas for that, I think my main motivation was to develop technology for my own research group. And that's, of course, the research group itself was building these devices and so on. To be the first in the world to have some technology on our in our use. This will give a competitive advantage for science if you are the first to use an instrument. Well, most things that I dreamed about have not become true, although there are some exceptions. So some things worked out. But I would like to add that there's some beauty also in failure, and that's part of life. I wouldn't like to live in Southern California where it's almost always sunny. It's nice to have ups and downs. That's part of life. Well, to the transcranial magnetic stimulation, which led to the Nexstim company, it has a really long history. The first patents were in 1860s, then some trials later on, and the first successful experiment was done by Tony Barker, in Sheffield, England, in '85. There you see in the figure. Tony Barker holding an electromagnet over the head, over the brain of a subject, and sort of a miracle happens. The hand muscles move, so it really activates the brain. You can artificially activate the motor cortex and cause motion of the hand. Then at the Biomech laboratory here in this campus, we, in collaboration with Helsinki University of Technology and University of Helsinki, developed new technology for this, and that led to the Nexstim company. So here is our first stimulator coil, little electromagnet. It's fairly strong, 5,000 amperes of current is flowing in this coil, and it produces a strong, very quick magnetic field. Because you have Virtanen, who was the developer of the electronics, and Janne Kampuri, developing other parts of the technology. That was very successful, and I founded with a couple of business experts the Nexstim company in the year 2000, and we developed what we named navigated TMS, meaning that there's an image of the brain, and you see on the screen the person's brain, and then you can decide where to stimulate in the brain. I cannot go into details. And then the other thing was to combine, one of the products of the company was this EEG, a special kind of EEG, which can measure how the brain reacts when stimulated. Here's an example already in 1997. First in the world, we stimulated here the left hemisphere, and the coloring shows the animation shows how the activity spreads. So first, the left hemisphere is activated. This is based on the EEG measurement, and then while 20 milliseconds later, the opposite side is activated because there are connections between the brain. So these two things, navigated TMS and combined with TMS, EEG. Then already in 2005, I was at that time the CEO of the company, and we had products delivered to many parts of the world, Europe, Japan, and US. And then a few years later, we got the first instruments were for research purposes. But then in 2008-09, when I was no more at the company, they received the FDA approval for clinical use, this, locating motor areas. And this is important before neurosurgery to know which part of the brain needs to be stimulated to activate muscles. So you don't want to cut there. There was another FDA approval, and I think 2014, Nexstim went public in Nasdaq First North, or what is it called? It's still listed. Those who invested in the beginning have lost their money, but anyway, it's doing well again. So then the other question, related to the other questions, why establish a startup company? So I wanted, we were funded by Tekes, which is now Business Finland, and they said that this is the end. You don't get money unless you establish a company. So to get more resources to develop the idea, so we established the company. And then, of course, it's very nice if you can benefit patients and the society. That's a big motivation. Also to gain independence, that was one motivation, and to get action to your life. I mean, it's really interesting, interesting to found a company and try to stay above the water. But, well, you have heard this many times that the purpose of your company should not be just to earn money to your shareholders. It's all, you have to have some other reasons, like I have listed here. What does it take? Determination. I'll do whatever is needed to succeed. I think I had this kind of thinking. It was very hard sometimes, but then you need common sense. So you need to do the right things right, and you need to do the right things. And a business idea and some competitive edge. So our competitive edge was that we understood really well, I think, what brain stimulation means and how we can make it better. It's still the Nexstim's idea. Well, we had many supporters. You have to be in connection with them all the time, and it's a lot of work also. I've listed here. Foundations and public, public funding, and then VC funding. But many grant applications were turned down, like the Academy of Finland. 5 applications that I wrote were failed, and so on. Well, that's part of life also. Here I have listed some challenges that have to be met. So the first wave of enthusiasm will disappear. At least the customers, or funders, everybody has initial enthusiasm. So you have to invent new things, or optimism. And then the second wave of enthusiasm may come too late, and so it takes time to demonstrate really the clinical usefulness and cost benefits. So it should be demonstrated quickly. There will be competition, and what you need is uninterrupted funding. That's a challenge. I'm not going to go into details. Well, what I'm doing now with my group, so jumping to 2022, we have got large funding now at the university, Aalto University, to develop the next sort of breakthrough or idea in TMS, multi-locus TMS, where the idea is that there's a helmet that you don't need to move the stimulator anymore, like it's done now with Nexstim system by hand or with a robot, which is slow. And so we want to have a helmet where there are many coils, up to 50 different stimulator coils that you can perturb any place in the brain at any time, and then we measure it with EEG, and we get feedback on how the brain reacted, and then the plan is to develop algorithms. So it's like self-driving cars. So nowadays, humans stimulate the brain. But the brain is quick, so humans cannot react quickly. Now, what we want to do is that an algorithm, some kind of intelligent algorithm, measures the brain all the time and then acts accordingly. This is the dream. Let's see how long it takes to come to that. But the instrument is being built. And we already have the first instruments being built. One was shipped to Tübingen, Germany, a couple of days ago on Friday, and to our colleague there. And this is a collaboration with the University of Tübingen, Aalto University, and University of Chieti Pescara in Italy. Italy will also get their system, not yet the whole head, but anyway, multi-locus TMS. This is an ERC synergy project with 10 million euro funding. So the goal is to get this multi-locus TMS and real-time closed-loop system and algorithms, as I mentioned, and to translate the science to clinical protocols. Just to end, I just want to say what Nexstim is now. It's really doing wonderful work, even compared to the beginnings. So there you see in the picture the individual brain according to which you navigate and stimulate precisely what area you want. And Nexstim is the leader in this navigated TMS, technically the only one that has FDA approval in the US for this navigated TMS. There are other TMS companies that have their strengths, but Nexstim is the best in this navigated TMS, now called Smart Focus. And there are many famous places where the instrument is already installed. And there's therapy and diagnostics where it's used. And then I'll end this with the other quote from Bobby Fischer, which I heard today when I was driving here. I was listening to Lex Friedman's wonderful podcast on chess. And he ended this podcast by quoting Bobby Fischer, "Chess is life." And I really thought this is important. So is science, that's life. And so is entrepreneurship. I don't like the comparison, like if you are in this kind of business, like science taken seriously, entrepreneurship, that's part of life. It's not life and work balance. Well, of course, you need balance, but also science or entrepreneurship is life. And that's beautiful. Thank you.
Hello. Yes. Thank you so much, Risto. I have actually one question for you, very quickly, because then we have a panel discussion for later. But why did you decide to take on the role of CEO of the company and not CTO? That's usually what researchers do, they become CTOs. But
Well, the first CEO of the company was Jari Karhu, a medical doctor, neurophysiologist. We planned it so that he serves at that role only for a couple of years because he lived in Kuopio, so he was half-time, part-time CEO in the beginning. Then the chairman of the company at that time said that now he wanted me to be the CEO. Simple as that. Because, yeah, for certain reasons. But it was planned.
so you took on the challenge. Nice. All right, so now we go for the second speaker of today, which is Vincenzo Cerullo. Very happy to introduce him. Yes, these are the right slides.
Yep.
So Vincenzo is a researcher and professor at the Faculty of Pharmacy here at the University of Helsinki. He is also part of HiLIFE. And he has founded Valo Therapeutics. So I think that you're going to tell us more about your two lives.
Sure.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Chiara. And thank you guys for inviting me. Okay. And do you put full screen?
Yes.
Right. Okay. And I go.
No, actually, this should work.
Okay, should work. Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks again, Chiara, for inviting me, and everybody for inviting me. Now, I will tell you a little bit about my experience from ideas to innovations from the scientist point of view, which basically is what I am currently. So, contrarily to Risto, I did not really join the company, but I was rather, I kept being, professor. So, sorry. So this is me, and actually my expertise and my group expertise is developing therapeutic cancer vaccines in a personalized way, and that's basically our dream. And actually, my group is somehow very involved, and we do like a lot innovations. So we have the habits of trying to push towards innovation almost everything that we do or everything that we think it's useful to impact society. Since the group was started 9 years ago, we have about 13 eventual disclosures, 7 patents, 5 of those have been fully licensed, and 1 spin-off company. Our first business Finland, well, it was still Tekes. Tekes Tutl funding was in 2014. It led to an ERC consolidator grant, which then led to Valo Therapeutics. I mean, the core idea led to Valo Therapeutics. Valo has been mentioned among the 15 biotech companies driving innovation in Finland, and it has been selected by Slash as a successful story in 2016, a successful story of the 2015. So this is Valo. We had after that another research to business grant, Tekes Tutl, called Peptichib, on something a little bit different than Valo. Valo is very focused on therapeutic cancer vaccine. Then we had another research to business grant where we developed a microfluidic chips that is actually used to scan the tumor fingerprints in order to be used for developing the vaccines. This was licensed to Valo last year. And now we are running our third research to business grant, which is called GlobeVac, and it was just approved. So basically, and both of them have led also to an ERC proof of concept grant. So basically what I'm trying to say that whatever we do in the lab, we try to push it out in a way that can directly impact our society and the benefit of the patient. So what do we need in order to have a successful project? Well, first of all, a lot of good luck. But that is really not really controllable. So my talk is not going to be, focused on how do you get lucky in your life, but rather on things that we can control. And one thing that we can control is surely the idea. So what kind of idea do you have from the very beginning, and how do you work with this idea? And actually, I'd like to show you this cartoon, which I found several years ago. Probably also very related to what Risto has done in his life. And it's the difference between, most of the scientists that try to solve a problem because it's useful for them, or scientists that solve the problem because they are curious. And as you said, I wanted to understand the universe. You didn't want a Nature publication. You just wanted to understand things. But the Nature publication comes as a consequence of the fact that you're trying to do something meaningful. So my suggestion to the scientists usually focused on the problem, not really on the solution. And I coach a lot of, grant writing, students, and even more students. But I noticed that very often we are focused on our solution. I know how to do something, so I try to find a problem that fits my solution. But this is really a loser approach. I mean, we should completely revisit it. The approach is to find a problem that has been not solved yet, and trying to use our enthusiasm, our intelligence, our creativity to solve the problem. So don't go there with your solution. Look for a meaningful problem and find a solution for that problem. Even when you have a nice problem to solve and a nice idea, be creative and try to look at the idea from different angles, non-conventional angles. I mean, try to think, well, sorry for the stupid sentence, but try to think outside the box. Try to think on solutions that other people have not tried yet. Another suggestion for the scientists is do not hurry. I mean, it was very fascinating to listen to your story, and I was actually pay attention to the time. I mean, this is a 20 years journey, but very often, especially young student and young entrepreneur, they really want to get there fast, because that's how the world moves here. Nowadays, everything needs to happen fast. But you know what? That doesn't happen fast. And that's the reason why you need to pick a topic, or you need to pick a problem, or you need to pick, something that is a mission for your life, something that you enjoy while you are doing that, without really thinking that you're doing it because you want to get there. You don't want to get anywhere. You just want to keep doing it because that's what makes you happy. And I like the metaphor because I like sailing and I like windsurfing. I like to be on the water. But when I'm on the water, I'm happy because I am on the water, not because I need to go anywhere. And that's the difference between sailing and having a motorboat. With a motorboat, you need to move fast from one place to another because you need to be in that place. But when it comes to your project, you need to find something that makes you happy while you're doing it. And that's about, sailing, if you want, for my thing. But even when you have a fantastic idea that it's a mission for your life and you really want to do it, there are still difficulties to be, actually taken. Now, when it comes to bioscience especially, you have a fantastic idea and you have your first patient treated, and there is a huge gap in between that necessarily your academic grant cannot fill. Because here there are a lot of proof of concept, a lot of product development. I mean, my students, and I understand that, they hate the product development because we are inventors. We don't develop things, we invent things. But yet, before you try something in human being, you need to develop. So you need to be you need to get out of your comfort zone and start looking for appropriate money that will fill that gap. Where do you find this money? Well, get out of your comfort zone, stop applying to the conventional grant and start applying to grants that are designed to fill that gap. Of course, we have Terkko. Here in Finland, we have Terkko, now Business Finland. We have the ERC proof of concept. We have had HiLIFE proof of concept. There is Novoseed. And there are a lot of other grants. But you need to look out of that comfort zone, and you need to start looking on grants that are especially designed to support the development of your product, the commercial development of your product. Oh, sorry. In my case, I also, a suggestion to a lot of young students is be humble. You don't know anything. Or even more senior professor, they think they know everything, and because they are very successful professor, they might absolutely be also very successful entrepreneur. That's not necessarily the case. So be humble and try to use what the environment is actually offering you. Now, I'm a scientist at the University of Helsinki, so I actually went to University of Helsinki Innovation Services, where I stumbled, and of course, into Jari, but Minla and Sara, which now they don't work there anymore, but those are the people that I interacted at the very beginning, and they guided me at the beginning on what exactly means to commercialize your idea. And I had no idea on how to do it. So this was extremely helpful, and to the young scientists that are starting to do this process, don't try to do everything. Don't try to think that you know already everything, but trust the environment. Go and talk to people that have done it hundreds of times before you. In addition to that, I was also, really breaking out the wall of the academia, trying to pitch my idea everywhere. This was at campus seminar organized by Saku Tuominen, who is a TV producer here in Finland. So completely different scenario, but still I wanted to, to see how people were reacting to my ideas. Here was my first pitch at Slash, the first time in 2015 when Slash opened also to science. Then, of course, I start traveling a lot to try to find the team that will make my idea into something. And I had to, by the way, I had to travel. So everybody that knows me, they know that I had to travel. So this was a big sacrifice, or probably the biggest, in my opinion. Just go and look for the possible team. We were thinking very big, and I was thinking very big. So I wanted the perfect team to get these things out of my lab. This was the very, 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 very first team. Well, Mike was the first CEO from Oxford, and then Sari and Tuuli were recruited back from Norway. So this was the very, very first team of Valo, which the name was Province at the beginning, which was not my idea, by the way. Now Valo is a completely different, much more structured company with a different CEO, a lot of other people employed there, and they are preparing for the IPO, which is happening sometimes soon. Last things that I want to share with you is what has been my role in the company and what is my role in the company. And I will basically answer to this question with this picture. She's Nikki, my daughter. She was torturing me already before the talk with request to buy some, things on Insta, on the Isa Hepol, whatever. And this is our first date. We were our first date. She was having ice cream, and of course she loves me. She will always love me, and she will never get married. And of course, the reaction of everybody is, to laugh at this sentence. But imagine that this sentence that I just said, which is an absurd sentence, and as you all have reacted, is exactly what 99% of the scientists does with their project. This is my project. I will die with it. Nobody has to touch it because it's my project and that's only my project. Now, if you have that attitude, your project will never become anything, because at some point you need to be ready to let it go. You cannot really always, like, also Risto, a story on your first company. At some point you need to let it go in order to see it grow and, become something that is, and then you need to do something else. That's how life is. That's how life is. So this was my last advice for everybody that is starting this process. Thank you all for your attention, and that's it. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Vince. Always a pleasure to have you on stage.
Thanks.
I'll keep the questions for when we are
Cool.
sitting. So if you can switch the microphone.
Sure.
So while we switch microphone, I introduce the last speaker for today, Jussi Hepojoki. I hope I pronounce it correctly.
That's fine.
Who is also a researcher at the University of Helsinki and who has patented one of his inventions called Elfret. You're going to tell us more about it. You told me that it's quite complicated, but I hope you will open it up.
Yeah, let's see.
Yes, so stage is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This way. Is this better? Okay, I'll try to find the slides first. Okay, so thank you, of course, for inviting me to talk about the innovation that we had and ended up patenting. This will be more focused on one topic and one topic only, unlike the previous really nice talks. I took the slide template from the university, and at first I was a bit like surprised with having the baby in here, but then in the end I realized that this baby could kind of symbolize the innovation in here, and that's why I left it in here. And I think I try to hope I will be able to go through the story of this innovation towards maybe teenage, or I hope. So this is the TRFRET team that I'm kind of presenting. I joined the team as maybe somewhere in the middle. So this really started off from Klaus Hedman's idea. He was at the time professor of clinical virology here in Meilahti campus, and then he got Antti Vaheri, professor emeritus, and Olli Vapalahti to join this group, and then slowly we came more. First there was Sara Heimo at that time, and then she became Hepojoki during the process, and then there is Visa Nurmi and Juuso Rusanen who did their have been working on their PhDs, and most recently my PhD student Annika Lintala has joined the. So first the field of invention. If I tell that it's called Elfret, it doesn't really tell anything about it. So what we wanted to do was infectious disease diagnostics. So diagnosing an infectious disease, as you now know, because of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. I'm pretty sure you're aware of the RT-PCR tests when you detect the nucleic acid of the pathogen, or then you detect the viral antigen. But in some cases, the symptoms may come a bit later, and the pathogen is already gone. And in those cases, then you can use antibody or serodiagnostics, detection of antibodies for diagnosing the disease and look at seroconversion. You know about these type of lateral flow tests and so on. So there are different ways of doing that. So the gold standard in that is ELISA, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, which is really highly sensitive and highly specific. But the downside is that the assay time is about 2 to 4 hours because of all the washes and everything. So what we wanted to do, or what was initially Klaus's dream, was to develop a wash-free assay that would be then easy and rapid to perform, but then while keeping it still highly sensitive and specific. And ideally it would have been or would be a versatile and multifunctional, so that you can translate it to looking at something else than just infectious diseases. So what he learned I think he learned in some course about first resonance energy transfer and also the time-resolved first resonance energy transfer. So that's basically a phenomenon. I'm not really going to go too deep into it because I don't know probably enough about it. But essentially, it's a phenomenon that occurs between two light-sensitive molecules. When they're close enough, they can transfer the energy used to excite the donor to the acceptor, and that's the basic principle behind the innovation. So the first idea was to use this phenomenon for antibody detection. So antibodies are basically these type of Y-shaped molecules, so it has two arms basically that can bind the antigen. So the idea was that we label the antigen on one hand with the acceptor and on the other hand with the donor. And if the antibody is present, then these two molecules bind the same antibody molecule, generating a threat active complex that can be measured. And this is indeed what then they filed an invention disclosure on this one, and even a patent application, and we later published the findings in using a model antigen. But the downside in here was that we didn't really get too high signals. It wasn't really too sensitive. So to improve the sensitivity, we thought that we want to bring these two chromophores closer to each other. So that's when I came up with the idea of using a molecule called protein L, which is which is a molecule that binds the arm of the antibody, like it binds close to the antigen binding site, and when using this molecule, we could then set up assays that would be rely on the threat, and then we filed in an invention disclosure. Because the professors all then work at the HUS lab, we also had to consult HUS lab for the patenting and ask for their interest in patenting it. Both university and HUS lab turned the innovation down. They didn't want to patent it, and we kind of believed in this and thought that this is a fantastic way of really measuring them, and went for patenting it by ourselves. So then after having the patent filed in, we started looking for funding for commercializing the finding, and we turned to Business Finland, but because this is an instrument that is not readily available like regular plate readers, we wanted to have an instrument that would enable us to go to the point of care, so go to a doctor's office, for instance. So for that, we applied the research to business Tutli funding from Tekes, or at the time now Business Finland, and we had a joint project with the VTT Technical Research Center of Finland, who were involved in their part was to design this type of what we called a shoebox that would be able to do the TR threat and would be about the size of a small shoebox. So we got the funding. I'm not sure if the dates are correct or not. Anyway, about 750K, 500 for the University of Helsinki and 250 for VTT. And then because of the total instrument, the IPR had to be returned back to the University of Helsinki, and we had to allocate like 80K for the Helsinki Innovation Services, and also from our budget to commercializing activities, which was good. I think at least I learned a lot during that journey. During the funding, we got some new indications. We set up the L-threat assay for Zika virus infections, and then celiac disease was the first autoimmune disease which we showed the L-threat to be applicable on. And then VTT delivered what they promised. They made this shoebox, and unfortunately we didn't really have enough time for optimizing and setting up the assay, but they did it anyway. The commercializing activities, HIS did a lot of market analysis and looking at the limitations and the potential of the innovation, and eventually we found a commercial champion who would have gone forward with the innovation called Oliver Bolt. And then we also joined Spark Finland, or kind of were invited to join Spark Finland. And that time, I think the team is supposed to participate Spark for about a year or so, which is what we did. And we did have good discussions and really interesting contacts in there. And we learned that some of us researchers would really need to jump and do it. And that's why probably we ended up in the end licensing the innovation. Then we after that we received a HiPo grant for studying the use of urine as a diagnostic material for antibody assays, and this was also fairly successful from the research standpoint, and also we did get good contacts through Oliver to companies working on diagnostic devices and also the end users of the diagnostic tests. But we didn't really, because of the lack of the instrument for the test, we didn't manage to set up a test use. We also participated SLUSH in the end on one of the University of Helsinki's presented cases in there. We didn't go into any stand, luckily, but then we got some contacts from venture capitalists, and I really liked personally the Aalto University, the Wave Capital, which is a kind of student-driven organization. They even actually volunteered to give us 50K for starting the commercializing and even providing an economic student or graduated student for participating in the company. Then an interesting event was this Ismo Sillanpää and his colleague Jani Karlejärvi, who contacted us and as a right move partners, or they wanted also to help us in commercializing our findings. We ended up having a really good discussions again with these guys, but nothing really concrete happened out of these. They did, or at least they said that they did a lot of contacting internationally. The good point about these guys was that they were willing to even take the IPR in the end when university decided that they will give up the IPR because our funding had expired at that point. But that never happened, and I was going through my email chains, and it turns out that maybe these guys even contributed to then finding the licensing partner for this innovation, who was Dr. Steve Wolf from US. He had set up an bio company, Illuminate Bio. So we, from our side, it was really, we just met over or virtually this Steve and his team and presented our case, and we ended up then licensing the patent to his company in October last year. So this, I think, highlighting the scientific output in here is maybe the main reason why we didn't end up commercializing it ourselves. So we were more of researchers than entrepreneurs in a way. And this is it from my side.
Thank you very much, Jussi. If I can invite all three speakers back, so we have some questions for you. And I have a few questions, but if the audience has more, just please raise your hand and I'll pass you the microphone. And if you are following us from home, I guess that you can type your questions in the the chat box, and Rashad, you can tell me. All right. Okay, so to start, so I think that academia is still very focused on academic research. So I'm guessing you had to build an innovation culture in your team. So how did you do that? Whoever wants to start.
Well, interesting question. It happened. It happens. I didn't try to change the culture. It sort of evolves naturally. Funding is an important thing. So if you want funding for scientific research, you nowadays especially have to explain to the funding agencies that there's some benefit. And one of the possible benefits is that there will be business or a benefit for the patients. So I think that's how it naturally evolved to get funding.
Yeah, I think, Chiara, mainly I agree. It just happened that the culture in the group was changed. I think the example, and of course people were seeing that we were achieving something and we were moving forward, and there was excitement, and so everybody got somehow excited. So before, I had to tell students to make sure to send the eventual disclosure before publish the paper. Now it's the other way around. They remind me. I mean, if I start pushing on a paper, or like, yeah, but we need first to send the eventual disclosure, and then so now it's really embedded in the culture. I mean, yeah. So it has happened naturally, but I think the good example and the excitement has been the key. Like always, you don't need to say it, to use too many words. You just need to show that this is fun.
Yeah, well, I guess I have to agree, but then I think the culture is also changing because of, I would assume that there are more courses on the younger students to kind of learn about the commercializing side, and also the funding bodies are paying much more focus on how and why this would be studied also from the economical perspective.
All right. So then do you feel that, like, globally in academia, there is this a change of culture happening, or how should the academia be more supportive for researchers that want to walk these two paths of, like, researchers and inventor?
Well, I can start. I'm an optimistic, and I always see by nature the glass half full. So first of all, I've seen that there's been a huge change in the academia towards commercialization compared to 10 years ago, and probably even more 20 years ago. But let's say that I joined the academia about 10, 15 years ago. It has been a huge change in my opinion. Is there anything else that we can do? I don't know. I'm already very happy about everything. But as also you said, there are a lot of courses nowadays on commercialization, on creativity. I mean, I think it has been, so I don't have any suggestion, but I can clearly see that there's been a drastic change into the culture from not only from the student, but also from whoever is guiding the academia. I don't know if you have a different experience.
No, I agree. I think that I could mention from the PI's perspective that jumping, I would assume that it's a bit harder even for a professor to jump off from there, but also during that process I got my first own grant, like this Academic Finland Research Fellow grant back that would have been impossible for me to turn that one down and jump on to working on that, because I had spent already 5 years applying for such a position. So I think somehow the university could support funding-wise those people that are interested. I'm not sure how that would physically happen, but that might be one way.
Well, first of all, I think that it's really important for universities to keep focusing on basic science. But for some individuals, maybe the majority of the scientists. So that should not be forgotten. Sometimes it is forgotten that everything should, there always needs to be an impact. It's not good. Science should be done because of curiosity. So people are curious of how the world works, how different aspects of it work. So that should be supported. Regarding the support to innovators, I think that it would be useful if universities would fund, give seed funding to new ideas. Nowadays, at least Aalto University has got a lot of money invested in equity. I don't know exactly how they do it, but I think they should also invest part of the money to our own startups. That could be done without too much extra risk, and there's potential benefit. Would help the innovators also.
Thank you. I have a few more questions, but I just want to check if there's a question from the audience. Oh, yes, we have one.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe they don't hear you from home. Okay. I'll repeat your question with the microphone.
I'm Simon from Biomedical. We have a research business project ongoing, so it's super fascinating to see these different approaches from all three of you. I think one main question, well, I have two main questions. Like one for Vincenzo, has it been clear for you to go this path, to have this clear separation, or was there some point during these things where you said you reach out, you went to pitches, and was there a point that you said, okay, I'd better stay on the research side and I'll leave this business part to someone else? Was there a key trigger point for you making this decision? Did you before think you would go into the business side? And then for Risto, the question was, you funded or started the company in 2000, and I could see that you have FDA approval in 2009. So I think that's a really long time point until you can generate revenue. And how did you make revenue during that time? How did you keep the company alive, and what were the revenue sources for you?
Okay, so I'll summarize for home because it was a long question. So the first question is for Vincenzo about if you had very clear that you wanted to be a founder or if at a certain point you also consider be more involved in the business, and at what point did you decide that this was the path that you wanted? And then for Risto, instead, the question was that you started the company in 2000 and then you had the FDA approval in 2009. So how did you fund the company in between?
I'll be very quick. I've always been very, very clear in my mind that I wanted to do only a simple academic work. I like teaching. I like being with my students. There is nothing about this job that I dislike. So I've never thought, not even for a second, that I would change my career, even for something, eventually, more fun or more active. So no, it has always been very clear to me. Of course, company is not something. I mean, I am the chair of the scientific advisory board in Valo Therapeutics, so I'm still somehow involved. As a parent can be involved when the daughter gets married. I can visit on Saturday and Sunday sometimes at Christmas I'm invited, but that's it. But I don't regret it. I mean, this is exactly what I choose, and I like it.
Let me comment on your first question first. So I'm also a scientist in my philosophy of mind. But I think it is really important for scientists also, if they have an idea, to themselves start the company and work for it. Because usually nobody else is interested in your idea, or they don't really understand or believe in it. So the scientist has to work for it for some time. But then, like me, I left the company after 6 years and then continued the scientific career. Nexstim was founded in the year 2000. The first delivery was to the US already in 2003, the University of Wisconsin, for scientific work, not for clinical work. So FDA approval was not needed, and that was the case for many years. So already in 2004, the company was profitable. Not after that, because because there was more and more investment to new technology. But we were selling well, 2 million euros already in 2004, which was more than the costs. So research groups first, and then.
Actually, can I like interrupt? Just following that, just a comment. Like, how did you then? You said that then someone wanted to like develop more technology instead of selling the like. You said that the finances went bad after that. Like, what happened? Like you were profitable and then you were not. Like, what happened there?
Well, what happened after the initial some kind of success? As I mentioned in my, there's enthusiasm in the beginning. So the researchers around the world started to do the research, but there were not so many. So it took time until they demonstrated that this is going to be useful. So I think that's what happened. And there was a clinical trial several years later that didn't succeed sufficiently well, so it took time.
I just want to add that 9 years, you had the thought that 9 years was very long, but I had the opposite reaction. I thought 9 years were very, very short time to get FDA approval because, of course, my mind is set on drug development, where 9 years is actually nothing. I mean, you will never generate revenue, which is basically phase 3 clinical trial and drug approved in 9 years. Probably will take 20 years. And the company needs to stay alive and do the financial round and talk to investors or eventually go into the stock market. So, I mean, there are the norm in drug development, usually the lifespan is longer, but there are investors, your company increased the value, and while the company is increasing the value, you do other financial round to keep supporting, first phase 1, then phase 2, and eventually by the time you get to phase 3, then you're either on the exit point because then you need probably 400 million, 300 million. In Valo's case, first financial round was 17 million, then probably something about 30 million. But then and it's already, 30 to 40 million is already phase 1, phase 2. And then before you know, you need basically probably 200 million, 300 million, which is not really an investment that investors can do. So you go basically to phase 3 and somebody has to buy the product or, big pharma have to support it. But again, this is 20, 25 years lifespan, not really that short. So I think it's normal.
I would like to comment on this lifespan. For the magnetic stimulation, it's even longer. So I read about the 1985 paper in 1986, and then I dreamed about the multi-locus stimulation, and tried to convince my professor in the US where I was postdoc, and coming back here, it took about 9 years actually to get the first funding in 1993. And only now are we building the original idea that I had in '86. So what is it? Something like 40 years later. And what I think is that the self-driving brain stimulators, so to speak, will be available only in the 2030s, or even later. So it's really long time span, and I like the comment that this is life. It's we develop things. There are little successes now and then, but there's no end in sight immediately. It takes decades, especially in biomedical technology or medical technology. You can do games and which is really important also, and little apps in years, months or years, but not medical technology.
Rashad booked the question first, then I'll pass it.
I have a question about the IP matters. Those of you who have actually established the company, I believe University of Helsinki took certain percentage of the shares, right? And I'm sure that's the case for Aalto. Has that been somewhat of a discouraging factor for investors, and how you've dealt with that?
Well, I think not for me at all. I mean, I'm not very good in maths, but I understood from the beginning that to have even 1% of something big is more than to have 90% of something very small. So obviously, for me, it was not really discouraging. And I'm not really, I've never heard our initial investors complaining about it. Actually, they were extremely fascinated and also encouraged by the fact that there was the university behind it. And our main initial investors are all from Australia, so they were not really local investors. But they liked that we were somehow linked with university.
Is it confidential information? What is the percentage that the university asked for the investment in?
I don't know if it's confidential or not, but it was roughly about 50-50. So basically the university kept 50% for the university, which was divided among inventor and basically all of us. And then around 50% was basically given to the management team, whatever the management was. I think generally, by the time I was a little bit annoyed by this 50-50, because of course that's my idea. I need to have much more. But obviously it was completely wrong impression from me. When I start talking with more business-oriented people, I realize that usually the amount of shares that it's given to the management team, basically to the CEO, I mean to the team that is actually commercializing, is much higher than 50. Because when I start probing, people were thinking, well, that's a very nice invention. We'll give you 5% of the shares, and then we take the 95, and then we make this happen. But there was everything between, 95, 90. I mean, the most generous one was 80-20. So back to university, I found that it was extremely generous on the research side, because they were actually offering us researchers much more.
But I understand Russia's question, because many investors nowadays say if the university is taking too big of an amount, even 30% is too big for them, because then they don't have the incentive of going and investing into the company.
Exactly.
So this is, I guess, the question, and this is what all the research groups now have in mind, because this is the message coming from all of the investors. So they want to get their share.
Yes.
As the university is, and a big thank you to the university and all the help and everything that they provided, and this is how it goes. But then the investor is the one that, so it's very interesting to know that your investors were not.
No. But I totally agree with you, because you actually basically. Sorry? Yeah, she's just basically saying that. She basically verbalized somehow more clearly what was, Rag's question, because you were talking about were they happy or not. They were very happy, but when it comes to shares, of course, they weren't. But this is also normal, because an investor is. The more shares it gets, the more money gets, the happier it is. So when it comes to shares, obviously that is an issue with all the other projects that we have had. I mean, it has always been an issue. And I think that probably, this could be, changed from university side and can be adjusted. But probably it's already done. I just probably not aware of it. I don't know how it's in Aalto.
Well, at Aalto University nowadays, first of all, if somebody invents something, of course, Aalto University owns the IPR, the patent rights. And then when a startup company is established, the startup has to negotiate with the owner of the IPR, Aalto University. And Aalto essentially wants to sell them to the startup at fair price. It can be money, or it can be based on the future revenues or future profit, or it can be a share of the company. But if it's a share of the company, it's very small, usually 5 to 10%, as far as I understand. Or it can be a combination. So I think that's a good thing. And then the inventors get a share of the sales of the IPR to the startup. So that university gets 60% and the inventors 40%. I think that's a very good thing in principle. Of course, these negotiations may be difficult. I don't know. When the Nexstim was founded in the year 2000, we were working here on at the hospital, and partially working officially for the hospital, employed by the hospital or the university or the university, or Helsinki University of Technology at that time, and that was very difficult because I think we might have been the first or one of the first startups from the hospital, and the decision makers, the top decision maker, the board of the hospital, so representatives from all the communes, Myrskyland and Vantaa and so on. They didn't know anything about startups, and initially there was somebody. I was in the meeting, and somebody raised hand and I said that the hospital should get 30% of the revenue, not the profit, and then it was lowered to 8% after very hard negotiations. This meant we had 5 to 6 patent applications. That meant that we did not use those patents at all, because that would be crazy to pay 8% of the revenue. So we just bypassed our own patents. That was really stupid, because that was the only way to get funding at that time from Sitra to transfer the patent rights. The patents, I don't think they are really very important for a startup to protect the business. It's really to get the funding. It's more credible if you have patent applications. Well, of course, it's to protect the business also, but it really gives credibility if there are patents or patent applications.
Okay, this is also a very long question. I try to summarize it. So it's again related to the investors. Yeah, but because at home I don't think that they heard you. So it's again related to the investors and the fact that nowadays investors might give you 10 years, but oftentimes it's even just 5 years, and then they want a return on their investment. So in a project that took 9 years or longer in the pharma and drug development, or maybe like when you're trying to license your technology, I don't know if it's really relevant for the investors, but maybe like with the dealing with the company, like how long does the patenting deal take? So how do you stay afloat while waiting to have something that starts producing revenue? Okay.
Just one comment. I think if the time span is 5 years, in that time you may not be able to become profitable or even sell anything, but what you have to do is to renew the story, develop a new one, so that after 4 or 5 years you have a vision that what's going to happen during the next 5 years. So maybe there will, if that's the exit time, then there will be the next investor who believes you. So you have to have some progress during the 5 years that makes you credible.
Yeah, exactly the same. Because in 5 years is very. I mean, it depends. If I'm an investor in your company, and I want my money back times 10 or times 100 in 5 years, I think this is unreasonable. Unless you are doing Angry Birds or video games on your phone, then it's a different story. But in biotech, there is no way you're gonna deliver the project at any unless there is a very early exit that a big pharma can approach you and like, whoa, this is so cool, guys, I want to buy it for 1 billion euros, and then it's 1 billion. Then you have the revenue, and they will be happy. But that's in my field, this has happened only once. That an oncolytic virus that was barely in phase 2. It was just finished the phase 1, was completely bought by Amgen for $1 billion, like cash, no milestone, no nothing. They gave $1 billion, and that has happened once. But that doesn't happen every day. So what really happens in real life is that your story mature, and and you have several milestones, and your story gets more mature and more mature. The more milestones are achieved, the more the evaluation of the company grows. So eventually, at the beginning, your company is worth 5 million, and then it's worth 15 million. And then you are approaching the clinical trial, and then it's worth 20 million. And then you are in clinical trial, and then it's 25 million. And then the first results are coming out, and then it's worth 30 million. And then during that time, then you actually make other fundraising. Then you have the Series A, whatever they are called. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm not a CEO, but it's exactly like science. I mean, you apply for a grant, the story becomes better, and then you apply for a bigger grant, and so on and so forth. And that's how you float until the exit day. And then the exit day can be whatever you prefer the exit to be. But I think that's how it works, or at least the way I understood so far.
He was first. I'm cutting the middleman.
Thanks. I would like to ask you, you mentioned about, you have 3 R2B projects, and then you systematically went to ERC, proof of concept grant. Now, I actually learned by doing, I applied to a research to business grant last year. It wasn't funded, but this year I did it again, and it was funded. Now, I'm actually a project manager in an R2B project. Well, the idea came from me, but I actually gave the project to a group in Aalto. So I have a PhD actually from Risto's group, but I am doing something completely different now from Risto. But my question is that why did you do R2B projects? For example, the professor I'm working with has not done any R2B projects before? And what about the POC? Why do you go to POC after that proof of concept grant? And what do you recommend in terms of this R2B and then next process? And one more question. You mentioned that not to be in a hurry, but I couldn't understand if, for example, if you do not hurry on something, how do you really try to achieve some aim in the end? So, because R2B has an aim, and it wants you to hurry on some stuff. So.
Well, the first question is why we went to ERC proof of concept and the R2B. So basically, the best project of our lab, so the one where we see potential, we usually apply not before and after. We apply simultaneously to let's call it, to grants that have a very nice commercial flavor, where we can really, fill the gap, the dead valley. And usually is Business Finland and ERC proof of concept, and in one case it has been a Novoseed. It's not because I like it, it's just because they are commercial projects. So where we know from the very beginning that we need to deliver certain tasks that are purely commercial thing. I like it because otherwise we will end up in the research trap, which this does not allow you to do the development that it's required to actually go and sit with an investor. So in our research to business, I think I have to say I've been quite successful there, because I have 100% success rate in research to business. Every time that I applied, I've been successful. But I have always in mind, how would I like to be at the end of the grant, my business deck. So that my business deck needs to be perfect at the end of the project. Then I can sit in front of an investor and tell him not what I have done in the lab, because I'm very good at it, but what we have done to commercialize this. So what was the problem? What was the solution? What, in real, business language. And I'm not able to do it. So we need special people to actually develop the business deck. But it's a business deck development. And that's for the first question. The second question is, when I say don't hurry, I don't mean that you should take it easy and make it slow. I meant that you don't need to have necessarily the pressure to get somewhere. I'm not having a company because I want to become a millionaire. I just want the company because I'm enjoying the process. And eventually the consequence will be that you become millionaire. But that's just a consequence of the fact that you were enjoying it, because there is a high risk that you won't become a millionaire. And why have you spent your life doing something that you hated? Waiting to become a millionaire, that didn't happen. So what I'm trying to say there is try to do something that even if you don't go anywhere, but at least you have enjoyed every day because you were doing something that you were passionate about and you liked it. And then if by accident you also become a millionaire, I would be very happy for you. But that's by accident, because it doesn't happen to everybody. It's not that 90%, as we know, 95% of spin-off company, they will fail. So that was what I was trying to say there.
One little question. How do you separate good investors from bad investors?
Well, that's I'll give to Risto first.
Repeat the question.
Well, the bad investors will take it all. They will fool you. I'm not going to talk more about that, but you have to be careful. Regarding the hurry, I think if you are an entrepreneur and you want to be successful, you really have to work hard, at least part of the time. Of course, you need also relaxation and free time, but you have to be ready to work whenever needed, whether you have whether it's Christmas or midsummer or whatever, if needed. And there is hurry sometimes. But I agree that you have to enjoy the process. Although sometimes bad weather, sometimes good weather.
Okay. Sure. No, I just want to add something, which I've never been CEO or anything, so I've never dealt, with investors like to the fundraising. But one thing that somehow has impressed me, among the best investors that I've seen, were the ones that were genuinely interested in the field. In my case, because eventually they used to be physician, or they had a personal history or story, so they wanted to make the difference. They were usually the best investors. And then sometimes I've seen investors that, going to, kind of the casino to play on everything, and they just want money back, but they don't even know what you're talking about, but you feel it right away. Again, I've never been a CEO, but I have had this experience during these years.
Yes, I'll ask the one online and then it's yours. So this is a bit different question. It's from someone that has a purely clinical background and is asking how can you move from having a pure clinical background to do research? If you have a take on this.
Just start a PhD, right? Yeah. I mean, you apply for a group, you start your PhD, and then, next day you're doing research.
So invest many, many years, basically. Okay.
Hi, I'm Antti Saarinen. I'm entrepreneur, and I have kind of answer for you and some kind of question. In my experience, usually only 1 of 10 startups fail in under 3 years, and so the success rate is really low. And then when you say 5 years is kind of long or short, I think then 10 years is short. So usually even the ordinary company like Angry Birds or doing the apps or IT or something like that, it takes 3 to 4 years to get the company running or get real good revenue or even profit. So when you have to be big in 5 years, it's I don't know what the investors are thinking about, because in my perspective, I have worked in IT and in constructions, and even with normal companies, it's hard to in 5 years to grow like hell, and I think there's a lot of bad investors and only a couple of good. So it's really hard field, and I have done also R&D projects. So if you have some questions or something, I'm glad to help you. So thank you for this event.
All right. So then I think last question to close. All of you already had some like personal suggestion, but like one last word of encouragement for researchers that want to take one of your paths.
Do it, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think being curious is the key, and liking the science, and if there's something that might be useful commercially, then go for it. It's an interesting experience.
Well, I think entrepreneurship is part of scientific life as well, if you understand it so that you have an idea and you want to make it true. So it's the same in science and in business.
Okay, Thank you very much for being with us today, and thank you to the audience here and the one at home that I never know where to look, but hello. And I think Rashad has some information on the next health talks.
Very briefly, I can say we have next one organized by Oulu Health on 2nd of November on MDR. So we'll send information about that.
All right. Thank you.